Welcome back to The Explainer. So, have you ever caught yourself wondering why in some of our older expressions, or honestly even in modern English with words like fortnight, we measure time in nights rather than days? I mean, today we just pull out our phones and check a solar-based calendar app, right? But the ancient Germanic peoples, they literally measured their time in nights. And to understand why they did that, we've got to look up at the night sky. In today's Explainer, we're diving deep into the fascinating cosmic mechanics of timekeeping in Norse mythology. And we're going to focus specifically on the celestial figure who's responsible for the whole shebang, Mani.
So getting right into it, why did ancient Northern Europeans count time in nights instead of days? Well, as scholar Rudolf Simek points out, Germanic computation of time was directed primarily toward the moon, not the sun. So to really grasp their calendar and how they ordered their entire lives, we absolutely have to look to the cosmos. And more specifically, we need to look at the divine entity who is actually up there driving that moon across the sky.
Now, this completely flips our modern expectations right on their head, doesn't it? If you're familiar with classical Greco-Roman mythology, you're probably super used to a male sun god, like Apollo, and a female moon goddess, like Artemis or Luna. But Norse mythology, it completely reverses this convention. In the Germanic cosmos, the sun is a female figure named Sol, and the moon is her brother, a male figure named Mani. In fact, the very word Mani simply translates to moon in Old Norse. But here's the thing. He wasn't just born into this grand celestial job.
Which brings us to Section 1, Arrogance of the Father and the Origin of Mani.
To understand exactly how Mani became the great timekeeper of the cosmos, we actually have to turn to the 13th century historian Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda. The whole story starts on Earth with a man named Mundilfari. And right off the bat, we get this huge hint at what's coming, because his very name might translate to the one who moves according to particular times. Now, Mundilfari had 2 kids, and according to Snorri's account, these children were just incredibly fair and beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that Mundilfari got a bit arrogant. He actually named his daughter Sol after the sun, and his son Mani after the moon.
Well, as you can probably guess, the gods of the Norse pantheon did not take kindly to this human arrogance. They were so outraged by Mundilfari's presumption that they punished him by literally snatching his children right off the earth. They placed the brother and sister directly up into the heavens, but they weren't just put up there to look pretty. No, they were forced to physically drive the cosmic chariots of the very celestial bodies they were named after. So Mani was now eternally bound to the moon.
But it wasn't some perfectly organized system right away. Actually, scratch that, it was totally chaotic at first. And this brilliantly illustrates the chaos of the early cosmos. In the famous poem The Völuspá, which recounts the history of the universe, Odin describes the very early days of creation before time was properly ordered. He says, "The sun knew not where she a dwelling had, the moon knew not what might was his, the stars knew not where their stations were." So Mani was essentially just wandering the vastness of space, not yet knowing his immense power or what his ultimate purpose even was.
Moving on to Section 2, Mani's celestial chariot and counting the years.
So the gods eventually met in council to create order out of all this cosmic chaos. They mapped out the different parts of the day and the year, and they finally gave Mani his divine assignment. Now, this is an absolutely crucial point. Mani isn't just a static rock floating dead in space. Far from it. He is a highly active participant in the cosmos. He physically rides a horse-drawn chariot through the sky. He actively guides the exact path of the moon. And, crucially, he completely controls its waxing and its waning. He's up there pulling the levers of the lunar phases, basically ensuring they happen in a precise, rhythmic cycle. And why exactly must he do all this? Well, in the poetic Edda poem Vafthrûdnismal, the god Odin asks a wise giant about the origins of the sun and the moon. The giant replies, "Round heaven journey each day they must, to count years for men." And there it is. That is Mani's ultimate cosmic purpose. By carefully driving his chariot and controlling the waxing and waning of the moon, he acts as the literal counter of years for humanity. Think about it. Mankind relies entirely on Mani's labor to know when to plant crops, when to harvest, and basically how to mark the passage of their entire lives.
To see just how deeply this timekeeping function is baked into Norse mythology, we can look at the poem Alvismal. Here, the god Thor interrogates a dwarf about what different things are called across the various realms of the cosmos. Now, pay attention to how the elves answer. While mankind simply calls it the moon, and the gods call it the fiery one, the elves refer to the moon by his exact cosmic function. They literally call him the counter of years.
And that's not all. In another book of the Prose Edda, the Skaldskaparmal, we get this awesome rapid-fire list of poetic names used for the moon. We have lune, waxer, waner, year counter, clipped, and hastener. Look at those. Half of these names like waxer, waner, and year counter are direct, literal descriptions of Mani's job. He is completely defined by the physical mechanics of passing time.
Let's dive into Section 3, The Man in the Moon, from myth to modern folklore.
So how exactly did this ancient Germanic timekeeping myth evolve as it was passed down through the generations? Well, according to the Prose Edda, Mani actually isn't alone in his chariot. He is followed through the heavens by a brother and sister named Huki and Bil. Now, in classic, kind of terrifying fairy tale fashion, Mani just snatched these two kids right from Earth while they were simply fetching water from a well. And Snorri Sturluson specifically notes that these two children, following Mani, can be seen from the Earth.
And this brings us to a pretty brilliant connection made by scholar Rudolf Simic. On one side of history, we have the Norse myth, Mani, along with the children Huki and Bil, carrying a pole and a water bushel across the lunar surface. And then, on the other side, we have the modern folklore of the Man in the Moon, which you can find all throughout Scandinavia, England, and North Germany. Simic theorizes that the ancient visual of Mani and these kids is the direct ancestor of our modern tales of the Man in the Moon. Thousands of years later, we are still looking up at the cratered surface of the moon, trying to spot the ancient driver who counts our years.
And finally, Section 4, The End of Time and the Looming Threat of Ragnarok.
Now, Mani's timekeeping ride, it is definitely not a peaceful one. He has to drive his chariot incredibly swiftly, and the reason is honestly terrifying. He is eternally pursued through the sky by a monstrous wolf named Hati Hrodvitnesen. Just as his sister Sol is chased by the wolf Skoll, Mani is locked in a constant, breathless race against Hati. So the phases of the moon, the turning of the months, the counting of the years, it is all being driven by Mani's desperate flight from this cosmic apex predator.
And, according to Snorri's rather dark prophecies, this race has a fixed, incredibly fatalistic ending. When the cosmos finally descends back into chaos during Ragnarok, the wolf is going to catch up. Mani will be overtaken, and the wolf will swallow the moon whole. The great timekeeper of the cosmos will simply be consumed.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering question to ponder. If Mani's entire existence is dedicated to driving the chariot that controls the lunar cycles, if he is the literal counter of years for mankind, what actually happens to the concept of time itself when the wolf finally catches him? Does time just stop? It's a haunting, totally apocalyptic thought to keep in mind the next time you look up at the night sky. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep your eyes on the stars.